Hello everyone, Miles98 here with a brand new video. Today we're going to talk about a very important man named Frantz Fanon. I chose to talk about him today because I plan to give a book review on one of his works. But before I can do that, I feel that I must first go over the man himself. Now, without further ado, let us begin. Frantz Omar Fanon was born on July 20th, 1925 in Fort-de-France, Martinique. He was born in what could be considered a black bourgeois family, as his father was a customs inspector and his mother had owned a hardware store in Fort-de-France, which was the capital of Martinique. The people of Martinique that lived within the bourgeois stratum would strive for assimilation and identification with the French culture in order to appease the colonizers. France, of course, would learn the history of France and his country through this Eurocentric lens until he entered high school. There he would learn the philosophy of negritude taught to him by Martinique's own Aimé Césaire, who was a critic of European colonialism. Fanon had his world torn by this and struggled with his racial identity and the assimilation of his culture after learning more of this philosophy. Fanon would later leave the colony of Martinique to join the Free French forces in World War II. After the war, he would stay in France to study psychiatry and medicine at the university in Lyon. Here he would be exposed to what is described as a lackluster and lazy form of anti-black racism, which was different to the colorist and class distinction he would experience in the Caribbean. This, of course, enraged him and would inspire him to write a piece called An Essay for the Dissertation of Blacks, which would later become part of Peau Noire, Masque Blanc, or, as translated, Black Skin, White Masks. Through this, he would begin to explore Marxist and essentialist ideas that would inspire him to take a radical departure from the assimilation negritude dichotomy that Peau Noire had inaugurated. He would later return to Martinique but wouldn't feel at home. He would later accept a chef de service, or chief of staff, for the psychiatric ward in Blida Joinville Hospital in Algeria. Apologies if I mispronounced the ward's name. Now, during this time that this happened, another event had occurred. During this time, in 1954, the Algerian National Liberation War was started, led by the FLN. Fanon would tend both French soldiers and the people that resisted against the French imperialists. This would lead to a crisis of consciousness, and by 1956, Fanon decided he could no longer help the French soldiers in their war against the FLN and resigned from his post. Fanon would later devote himself to the liberation of all African colonies and all colonies in general. He would later be stationed in Tunisia, where he would help train nurses for the FLN, edit their newspapers, and write their articles. In 1959, he would publish a series of essays called L'Encontre de la Révolution Algérienne, or translated as The Fifth Year of the Algerian Revolution, which gave a detailed account of the oppressed natives of Algeria. The same year, he would become a diplomat for the Provisional Government of Algeria and became an ambassador to Ghana. Sadly, Fanon would later be diagnosed with leukemia, which would lead to his deteriorating health. This, however, did not stop him from conducting his work. He would begin writing his final piece, a magnum opus called Le Damné de la Terre, or The Wretched of the Earth. This would show a violent and inhumane actions done upon the colonized people. It was a call to action along with key points of what the colonized people should do to attain their freedom. Fanon would later be brought to America by a CIA agent for treatment of his illness, but sadly, on December 6, 1961, Frantz Omar Fanon fell asleep in the Bethesda, Maryland hospital. The FLN had requested his body to be returned to Tunisia. This request was honored, and his body was delivered to the country, where it would later be transported to Algeria, where he is buried to this day. Frantz Fanon is one of the many important figures when it comes to national liberation, psychology, and decolonization. He is personally one of my inspirations for when it comes to studying psychology, and that is part of the reason as to why I chose to review his book on the next video. Now, of course, he did make mistakes, as he somewhat supported the lumpen proletariat line, held a positive view on revisionists such as Castro and Khrushchev, and supported insurrectionist warfare instead of people's war. All these points can be found in the book The Wretched of the Earth, which is linked down below. And we should be critical of such errors, but overall, he is still an important figure to read if one wishes to understand the psychology of the colonizer and the colonized, as he applied a dialectical outlook within psychology. Now, before I depart, I am sure some of you are wondering why am I not working on my script for sensualism, postmodernism, and objective reality. Well, there will be some changes. Since I already went over centralism and its importance in my Juche video, link will be down in the description below, I feel no need to do a separate video on it. Postmodernism is too big of a demon for me to tackle, and I think my comrade is more equipped for it, as they are more educated on the topic. Objective reality I might still do, but it will be under a different name. That will be it for now. This is Mouse98, signing off.